What are the characteristics of feminist literary theory? First of all, we will see that feminist literature portrays characters or ideas that attempt to change gender norms, the norms which were present from the past or with the continuation of the history of human beings. These norms are all the time in the practice. So feminist literature is portraying all those ideas and characters which all the time attempt or try their best to change those gender norms of discrimination or stereotyping ideas. And this literature tends to examine, question, and argue for change against established and antiquated gender roles through written word. Any written word, a word, or any sort of traditions or norms or ideas or principles, rules, and regulations which are in practice through the ages. The feminist literature is all the time there to tend to examine, then to question, and afterwards to have discussion for a change, because all these established and antiquated gender roles are now outdated, and with the passage of time these must be changed if not abolished. This literature strives to alter inequalities between genders across societal and political arenas. If society and the field of politics is concerned, the gender inequalities should not at all be there to follow and practice. This literature seeks to add a unique and often overlooked feminine specific voice and tone together to gender, social, and political issues as well as social inequalities, where a feminine voice is needed to make an impact. That human beings are based on if two genders like men and women, and one is able to enjoy every type of freedom in society, in the same way the other gender, the other part like women of society, they are also there to enjoy equally that particular freedom. So far as social and political issues are concerned, then the women must also be there to raise their voice. Women must also be there to speak about their rights or speak against all those things which they are facing in society, just because of the cruel behavior or tyrannized behavior of men. And their voice must have some impact on the literature as well as on the scenario of the world. 1960s feminist literary criticism was something else. In 1970s it changed to some extent, but in 1980s the feminism had to face a complete change in mood and mode. uh, Feminist criticism became eclectic. Because in 1970s we thought that the major effort went into exposing what might be called the mechanisms of patriarchy, as you read in the previous lecture. So now we are going to discuss about the mood and mode of feminism in 1980s. Firstly, this feminist criticism became much more eclectic, and that it began to draw upon the findings and approaches of other kinds of criticism like Marxism, structuralism, linguistics, and many other different kinds of criticism. Number two, it switched its focus from attacking male versions of the world to exploring the nature of the female world outlook and reconstructing the lost, suppressed records of female experience. That male version of the world for exploration, for writing something, or for searching something, that was not only acceptable in 1980s. 1980s feminism focused or stressed on the attack on male versions of presenting the world or portraying the world. Number three, attention was switched to the need to construct a new canon of women's writing by rewriting the history of the novel and poetry in a way that neglected women writers were given new prominence. In the past, as you know, that women writers were not at all permitted to write something, and if they had written something, they were supposed to not to use their own name or personal name. In this since you may also quote the example of George Eliot, as her real name was Mary Ann Evans, but according to the situation as well as the time, she was using the name of her brother George Eliot. Male version of that particular name. So this attention was now switched to the need to construct a new canon, that everything was set by the ideas as well as ideology of the men so far as history of novel and poetry, but now it was stressed that women must also search for rewriting the history of novel and poetry just because of their own point of view, so that it must be followed as a tradition by women in coming times. What is the critical methodology used in feminism or feminist literary theory? First of all, identifying with female characters. By examining the way female characters are defined, critics challenged the male centered outlook of authors. First, the females must try to identify the female characters in their writings. Feminist literary criticism suggests that women in literature have been historically presented as objects seen from a male perspective, because male were the writers, male were the able to have the authority, meaning they were the authoritative writers or members of society. So they presented women as an objects, or they objectify the women from their own personal point of view. Now it was a time to change that particular perspective. Number two is re-evaluating literature and the world in which literature is read. By revisiting the classic literature, the critic can question whether society predominantly valued male authors and their literary works because it has valued males more than females. So it was true nature that if males were only writing, so they were able to be appreciated, and the attention of the public attracted towards male, because it was male centered or male oriented world. A sense of parallelism in criticism only between male and female authors. But now the time, with the changing time, or with the passage of time, uh, parallelism in criticism was there to be constructed between male and female authors. What sort of writings are being produced by men, and what sort of writing are produced by female authors? There must be some comparison and contrast between these two writers as well as their writings or writing ideas. Male and female characters must also be there to be judged or criticized on parallel aspects. Male and female readers as well. Same was the case with the readers. If the readers are male and they are reading some version written by females, so there was a difference in their opinion. And same is the case was on the contrary, that if the writer is a male and the readers are female, so parallelism and comparison and contrast was always there, and it was the time to reevaluate all the past literature which was written by men only and then rewritten or written by females. Number three is embodying or undercutting of stereotypes. The theory recognizes that literature both reflects and shapes stereotypes and other cultural assumptions. It examines how works of literature embody patriarchal attitudes or undercut them, sometimes both happening within the same work. Uh, and you may see in the first wave of feminism, when the book or work, the Woman Bible, was written in the late 19th century by Elizabeth Cady Stanton. All these things which are discussed in the first 2 points, they were related to the first wave of feminism, and afterwards the 19th century work, the Woman Bible, were based. These two particular ideas were based on these two first points. Now, number three is it is an example of a work of criticism firmly looking beyond the more obvious male centered outlook and interpretation. Second wave period showed academic circles increasingly challenge the male literary norm. First wave of feminism was based on a work of criticism, and number two or second wave was related to academic circles increasingly challenging the male literary norm. It has intervened with postmodernism and complex questions of gender social roles. Number four is the tools of the feminist literary critique. You may say that what are the tools are there on which this critique uh, can be judged or can be based on. So, first of all, historical analysis, psychological analysis, linguistics analysis, then sociological analysis, economic analysis, intersectionality, race, sexuality, physical ability, and class. All these are the different tools through which feminist literary critique really works, and all sorts of ideas, passions, feelings related to the oppression, cruelty, as well as non-working condition of women are considering women lower than the animals or inferior to the men. All these things are discussed and judged on these different with the help of these different tools. Next is feminism use some different methods on which it has become a good theory or a good movement. Number one is deconstructing the way the women characters are described in fiction if the writer is male, deconstructing how one's own gender influences how one reads and interprets text, and how reader identifies depending on reader's gender. So first you have to deconstruct the idea if the writer is male. Number two, you have to deconstruct your on gender influences if one reads and interprets text, and how reader who being based on the gender of the reader and the judgment of the reader. Number three is reconstructing how women autobiographers or biographers treat their subjects, and how uh, are secondary characters to the main one. There are some main characters in the fictional work and some are secondary characters. So there must be a difference between autobiographers and biographers if the writers are women. So this was a deconstruction also so far as feminism was working. It was also there to describe relationship between the literary text and ideas about power and sexuality and gender. So far as power is concerned, males were all the time there to be titled as powerful members, and sexuality, so far as their physique is concerned, they were not only powerful but able to protect the women. And then gender inequality, it is based on the critique of patriarchal or women marginalizing language, as such as universal use of masculine pronouns he and him. For example, if we say that human beings are mortal, so we will use a collective word which is there to stand for males and females as man. So man basically is masculine word, and there is a pronoun he and him which is all the time using all the time used by all the writers in west as well as in east, because the language is marginalized so far as women's choice is concerned, and all these writers were considered to be the other. They were marginalized writers, women writers in the beginning, but by the time it went towards its progress and development. It also notices and unpacks differences in how men and women write. All the changes, societal changes, psychological changes, emotional impact, as well as environmental issues are there to unpack the differences in the writings of women and men. Reclaim it also reclaims women writers who are not famous for are marginalized, are undervalued, sometimes referred to as expanding or criticizing the canon. For example, how Afraban and then Zora Neale Hurston's writing were retrieved by Alice Walker. These ladies were Afro American writers, and they tried their level best to create a difference, because only the women of color were enjoying all those rights in society. And that you are reading feminism according to different perspectives. First, that there is an equality between men and women, and then there is an inequality between the white women as well as in the black women. So now we are talking about all these aspects. It was there to reclaim interiority and voice of females as a valuable contribution to literature if marginalized or ignored. All the time, women were marginalized and ignored because their contribution to literature was not at all accepted by the male oriented society. But in 1980s, the mood and the mode of society was changed, and they accepted the writings as well as the ideas presented by the women in society for creating literature or any literary phenomena. It analyzes multiple works in a genre as an overview of a feminist approach to that genre. For example, science or detective fiction. It analyzes multiple works by a single female author. That there are different dimensions in which feminist approach works, or in which feminist idea works, that is based on analysis of the multiple ideas like one genre and the another genre. It also examines how relationships between men and women and those assuming male and female roles are depicted in the text, including power and relations. If men are only in power, they will always try to misuse their power, and they will spoil the relations between them and the women. In the same way, if their relations are broken, the children will be called as broken home children, and the ratio of divorces as well as broken home children will be increased in the world. It also examines the text to find ways in which patriarchy is resisted or could have been resisted. Now, what are the important themes through which feminism criticism explores, or it starts its traveling or working towards uh, experimentation, as well as it reaches towards its final destination? The first theme is discrimination, and you are very well aware that we have discussed in different forms that there was a discrimination between men and women in society, and one was superior like men, and the women were inferior on different grounds, on different bases, so far as their physique, so far as their mental compatibility, as well as their mental ability and emotional ability was concerned. They were underrated, they were oppressed, they were not at all able to discuss or voice out their feelings or passions, and it was the right of only the men in society, that they were capable of doing anything, everything at any cost and at every cost. So women were unable to uh, produce a single work like writing or any. They were unable to have proper education like men, they were unable to have proper protection like men in society, and they were not at all prioritized so far as their domestic issues were concerned. All the time, father, brother, um, husband, and son were prioritized. They were not at all given priority to women. Stereotyping, the all past ideas which were related to the subjugation as well as the oppression of the ladies, and they were still in progress. They are the stereotyping ideas, and these stereotypical ideas were there, that women are all the time present in society to have all sorts of uh, oppression, all sorts of wrong behaviors, all sorts of negativities, and they have to face, not only face, but they have to bear all these things. Objectification, women were considered to be an object and toy. We have discussed it also earlier, and specifically they were there to be tortured on the basis of sexual objectification, that they were there to happy their males, they were there to produce the children, and they were there to rear up all those children. They were responsible for all sorts of negative things happening in the world, and this was only and only the condition of the females, that they have to suffer from all these inflictions which were set on these ladies by men. Oppression, all sorts of oppressions were only in the share of the women, and they have to face that particular oppression, which was considered to be set on the weaker creatures, timid creatures, coward creatures like women, and they were not able to speak against all those things or to raise their voice in the favor of their own selves, because they had to hold their tongue all the time. They were only there to work throughout the day, to face all the difficulties, to face, this was the predicament of that times of women, that they had to face all these things, but they were unable to speak about these things. Patriarchy, male dominated society was there to follow all the rules or standards set by the men for their own sake. These standards, as they were male oriented, and they were used there for the benefit of men, but not for their any single benefit for the women. So this male dominated society was entitled and labeled as only and only the superiority of men over women.